Good day. It's again the 31st of March, and this one's going to be on the worst domestic posts of duty for federal law enforcement. What is considered to be the worst and the best. Okay. Now, one thing that you should be aware of if you're applying to the FBI, if you're applying to the DEA, if you're applying to ICE as a special agent. Now, if you're applying to Customs and Border Protection, you're probably, if it's Customs Border Protection Officer, you're applying for a specific office, okay? So those entry-level positions are going to be in places where people don't want to go. So, but you know what you're applying for, basically. You would put down any location that you're willing to work. If you're applying to the Border Patrol, it's going to be somewhere on the Mexican border, guaranteed. What about other agencies? The FBI, the DEA, Immigration, Customs Enforcement, any of these other agencies? Well, there is a consensus, I would say, of good places to be and a consensus of bad places to be. Really, the best place to be, it's individuals, what you think is the best. Okay, I'm not going to get into it. But bad places, you sign a mobility agreement. What does that mean? It means that the agency can move you without your consent and without notice to any station in the United States of America. Okay? So that means when you apply for a federal job, you will sign a mobility agreement. And coming out of the academy, you'll probably be reassigned from the office where you were hired. In my case, it was Chicago. Almost my entire class went to Miami. But there's other places where you could be sent. Now, what are some of the bad places that you could be sent, or at least what are considered to be bad places by most agents? There are some agents who love these places, okay? But number one on the list, and you might be surprised, it's San Juan, Puerto Rico. Nobody wants to go there. But if you don't speak Spanish, you won't go there. But what is the bad point about San Juan, Puerto Rico? It's got a very high crime rate. And number two, the taxes, the Puerto Rican taxes, which you have to pay because you are not, this isn't a foreign assignment. This is part of the United States. Okay, a lot of people make sure Puerto Rico is part of the U.S. You have to pay those taxes. Okay? And they're very high. And it's just not a good place to be unless you're from Puerto Rico. Now, I get it. People go there for vacation. But if you go outside the areas where the vacation areas are, the touristy areas, it's not so nice if you're not from there. And there's, again, like I said, a high crime area. The taxes are outrageous. And it's just, nobody really wants to go there. Okay. The second place, and you might be surprised with this, Guam. Okay, Guam, USA. Where is Guam? Well, Guam is an island in the Mariana Chains in the South Pacific, and it was taken by the United States as consequence of the Spanish-American War, as was Puerto Rico in 1898, and it was occupied briefly by the Japanese in World War II, and it's been occupied by the Japanese again. Now, what do I say by that? Well, it's part of the United States. Okay, they speak English in Guam. But the housing costs are outrageous. And the reason the housing costs are outrageous is because Japanese investors have bought up a lot of the real estate, and there's only a limited amount of real estate on Guam. So what this means is that it's going to cost you a lot of money to buy a house. You're probably not going to be able to buy a house in Guam. Okay? And again, these are domestic moves, so the government doesn't pick up your housing. You got to ship your car there. The government will ship your vehicle there, but it's and it's on the other side of the world too. That's the other thing. Now, the reason the Japanese have bought up so much real estate is because it's a 3-hour flight to Japan, and it's their tropical island getaway. But that doesn't help you if you're a DEA agent to sign there. Now, the U.S. 7th Fleet Forward Base moved from Subic Bay, Philippines to Guam. So there's a lot of naval personnel there. There's a lot of people on that island, but again, the Navy doesn't have to pay Guamanian taxes because they are, you pay the tax in the state of your home of record, and in most states don't tax military pay. So it's totally different than if you're an agent assigned there. If you're an agent assigned there, you got to pay the taxes. Okay, so that's a bad consideration. The island is only so big. They do have a big meth problem in Guam. Puerto Rico, they got every kind of drug problem you could think of. What is the third garden spot? It's a tourist attraction. A lot of people like it, but no agents want to go there. It's San Francisco, California. Why? Again, the cost of living is outrageous. B, it's kind of a lack of support both by certainly by state officials and local officials for anything related to drug law enforcement. So San Francisco doesn't have a lot of takers, I can guarantee you. Most of the people who are assigned to San Francisco are assigned there against their will. How's that? Okay. So San Francisco is not a great place to be. It's not sought after. If you want to get it, you'll get it for sure. But if you don't want to get it, you probably won't get it. Interesting aside, one of the young ladies who was in my academy class, BA 40, Shelley Zimmerman, she had been a San Diego police officer. They gave her orders to San Francisco. She resigned from the DEA, went back to the San Diego police, and worked her way up to be chief of police. So how do you like that? She's now retired from the San Diego police, but she wasn't going to San Francisco, even though it's just up the coast. So not too many people want to go to San Francisco. The fourth worst place to go, and again, this might surprise a lot of people, it's New York. If you're not from New York, you probably don't want to go to New York. And the reason being, again, the cost of living is extremely high. Number two, the taxation is extremely high. Number three, the lack of support. Again, this is very important, whether the U.S. attorneys who come from that area, whether the local attorneys, whether you have support for law enforcement, and the perception is in New York you do not. Now, there's a lot of agents assigned to New York. So you could be assigned there very easily coming out of the academy, whether you want it or not. Fortunately, my class got Miami, which is a good place, a very busy place in the 1980s, but a good place to go. Okay, and it was affordable, and the work was great, and the climate was good and everything. So, we all loved Miami. I don't know anyone who disliked Miami. Okay, the fifth place, and this is arguable, but I would say it's LA. And again, why is LA so bad? Number one, the cost of living. Try to buy a house there. Good luck. Number two, the taxation. California taxation is a killer. Really anywhere in California. You can get run over with a bus paying their taxes. Most people who live in California, who are state police or highway patrol or whatever, they retire to Nevada because they don't want to stay in California and pay that tax. Thirdly, again, you've got state attorney, at least a district attorney, who's not law enforcement friendly at all. Now, the U.S. attorneys are appointed by the president, and that's who you're probably primarily going to be working with. But what they do is going to affect the state and local police, and what the state and local police do affects you. So your morale, will be involved with that. New York and LA are notoriously hard to get out of because not too many people want to go there. So once they get you there, unless you get your GS-13 and get overseas or get a domestic job that's somebody in a post of duty somewhere, you're probably pretty much going to be stuck there. Okay. Now, this also applies to the Bureau. You have your large offices, which we call your divisional offices. And in DEA, it'd be like New York, Chicago, Miami, Los Angeles. There's, many field divisions. And then you have your district offices. And almost every state has a district office. It's headed by a GS-15 if it's not a divisional office. So in Wisconsin, for instance, the head of the state, the district office, is the ASAC, the Assistant Special Agent in Charge in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And then there's a resident office, a smaller office in Madison, and a smaller office even yet up in Green Bay. Okay. Now these little offices, these posts of duty, there's a lot to be said for them. If you want to stay as a GS-13 for your career, I spent some time at the post of duty in Bangor, Maine. There were 2 DEA agents assigned to the whole northern part of Maine, which is a big area. I mean, it's a huge area. And I had a little task force of 3 or 4 state and locals and a customs officer. It's before 9/11. And, I loved it. My wife hated it. So it's what you like. The people from Maine northern Maine don't like you if you're not from northern Maine. They don't trust you. They think you're from away. That's what they say. You have a strange accent. I have an accent like this. They got that goofy New England accent. But the kind of cases that you get up there are just, compared to what you would get in El Paso and Miami, are, one case I had, the U.S. attorney insisted we do a federal case on it. This kid took a fentanyl patch, put it on his tongue, and died. Okay, huge, terrible tragedy. You want to make a federal case on the source of supply, which we did. But that's the kind of cases you're going to work. They're not, you're not going to get hundreds of kilos of dope because it doesn't come in there. It comes in south of the border. By the time it gets up there, it's been stepped on numerous times. Alaska has a lot to be said for it, but again, if you're not from Alaska, you may not want to be there. So again, small posts of duty, those are good places to retire to and set your roots down, or resident offices, which are smaller offices. So let's use an example of Virginia, where I live. Okay, well, the Washington Division in D.C. is responsible for this whole state, as well as Maryland and West Virginia. Okay. Now there's a district office in Richmond, Virginia, headed by a GS-15, and they have several enforcement groups. And then there's resident offices, smaller offices in Roanoke, and a smaller office in Norfolk, Virginia. And then there's posts of duty way out in the middle of nowhere with just one or two agents in them. And those are pretty good places to be assigned, actually, because your boss is far away, and his or her boss is even further away. And it's a good place to retire to, kind of in place. But you have your work to do. You got to have your production for sure. But you're not going to have somebody breathing down your back. You're not going to get, hey, you details. Hey, you go do this, go do that. And so if you're a non-supervisor, post to duty is definitely the way to go. But you're not going to get that out of the academy. Those go to senior agents who can put in for those jobs and have earned those jobs, basically. And basically, resident offices, it's largely the same. It's not a good place to start your career. A good place to start your career, notwithstanding what I said. New York, LA, Miami, Houston, Chicago, someplace where you're going to get a lot of different types of cases, and you can work a variety of cases. So hopefully it's given you some insight as to how the government operates. Again, bear in mind that you signed a mobility agreement, which means that they can transfer you at will without your consent and without notice to you. They give you 90 days notice, but without notice to you. They don't have to call you and ask if it's okay. You just get orders one day, I'm moving to, wherever. And if they decide they're going to move a bunch of people to the southwest border, and you're one of them, well, you're one of them. You're not going to go home and tell the wife we're moving to Eagle Pass, Texas, So it's got its good points. It's got its bad points. Every place that I went to in DEA, with the exception of Miami, I put in for. So I put in for El Paso. I put in for Bangor, Maine. I put in for DEA headquarters. I had orders out of DEA headquarters to go to El Paso as a supervisor. My son had a brain injury, a brain tumor. So he was being treated at Johns Hopkins, so they gave me a hardship to the Washington Division, and they basically forgot about me. I was only supposed to be there 3 years. I was there from 2001 to 2012. That's 11 years. That's unheard of for a group supervisor, but that's fine. I did my job. I kept my mouth shut, did what I had to do, and got out of it. So hopefully this has given you, something to think about, because you're going to have to sign a mobility agreement. And that's important, because if you are a person who just wants to be in one place, and again, one of the guys that I flew down to Quantico with when we got hired was from Chicago, and he failed the PT test, but they let him stay on, but he wasn't doing real well at all, and he had a chip on his shoulder. And then when he got the orders to Miami, he said he wasn't going to Miami, he was going back to Chicago. So he went back and joined eventually the Cook County Sheriff's Department, which is the sheriff's department that handles the county that it incorporates, is over Chicago. So, but again, what you miss is what you miss. He never got to see anything else. Chicago was fine, but it's not the whole world. There's a lot of things to see. So, good benefit to federal law enforcement: travel. A lot of different places, a lot of different experiences. The bad thing, travel. You know, you may not be where you want to be. And it's kind of a dirty secret that if they want to move somebody on, or they have a senior 13 who is nearing retirement, who's been in place for a long, long time, they would never do this, right? Yeah, they did do this. They just give you orders to LA and see if you retire. They do that because they know you're not going to move your family across the country. So again, these are the type of people you're working with and for. And it's not any different from any police department or anything else. There's no malice involved. It's all business. But you should know, mobility and federal law enforcement, they go together. If you don't want to travel, don't become a federal agent, okay? Hopefully it's been useful to you, and have a good day.